Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to give you the fast track on complex topics, and today we're looking at a really important path to building a family, IVF using donor eggs.
That's right. And it's often seen as, maybe a last resort.
Yeah, exactly, like something people turn to only after struggle.
Oh, we really want to reframe that. Our sources show this is often a strategic choice, a medical decision that can actually lead to much higher success rates.
Okay, I like that strategic, not just necessity. So let's unpack that. We know some obvious reasons, right? Like if someone's ovaries aren't working, or maybe damage from treatments like chemo.
Those are the traditional indicators. Premature ovarian insufficiency, or POI, or diminished ovarian reserve.
Which you measure with those blood tests, AMH and FSH.
Exactly. Low AMH suggests fewer eggs left. High FSH means the ovaries are working harder. Those are clear signs.
But what about the less obvious situations? Maybe where someone is still ovulating, but donor eggs still come up as the recommendation.
Right. That's where it gets interesting. A huge factor is advanced maternal age. Let's say someone in their early 40s, maybe even up to 45 plus.
Yeah.
So even if they're having regular cycles, the main issue becomes egg quality.
Yeah.
As eggs get older, their genetic machinery just isn't as reliable.
Meaning more chromosomal errors, aneuploidy.
Precisely. The rate of aneuploidy skyrockets.
Right.
So you might get eggs, you might even get embryos, but they often don't have the right genetic instructions to develop properly or implant.
So quantity isn't the whole story. The quality is key, especially later on.
Absolutely crucial. And that leads to another reason. Repeated IVF failures using a person's own eggs.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, if someone's gone through, say, 2, 3, maybe more IVF cycles, they retrieve eggs, they fertilize, but the embryos just stop growing.
Right.
Or they transfer perfectly good-looking embryos and they still don't implant.
Yeah.
That's a really strong sign that the egg quality itself is likely the limiting factor. Switching to eggs from a young, healthy donor basically bypasses that major hurdle.
That makes a lot of sense. Especially thinking about the emotional and honestly financial drain of cycles that don't work.
Yeah.
Donor eggs could potentially shorten that time to actually having a baby.
It often does, significantly. And then there's the genetic side, too.
Right. You mentioned genetic risks.
Yeah. If the intended mother carries a known high-risk genetic mutation, maybe something serious or even certain mitochondrial disorders, using screened donor eggs means they don't have to worry about passing that condition on.
So it offers a kind of genetic security blanket proactively.
It absolutely can. And, it also fits into how families are built today.
How so?
Well, donor eggs are essential for same-sex male couples who need a gestational carrier. And for lesbian couples, one partner might provide the eggs, the other carries the pregnancy. That's a way to share the biological connection.
Shared motherhood.
Or single parents by choice. Or even couples who've been dealing with infertility for a long time and just want a more direct path to pregnancy. It becomes a strategic choice for efficiency, too.
Okay, that covers a lot of ground. Let's pivot to what you mentioned earlier, the success rates. Because those numbers are, frankly, pretty striking.
They really are. When you look at live birth rates per embryo transfer using donor eggs, you're often seeing figures between 50% and sometimes even up to 70%.
50 to 70% per transfer. That's huge compared to some other scenarios, especially with age factored in.
It is. And the reason boils down almost entirely to the egg source.
The donor.
Yes. The donors themselves. They are typically young, usually in their 20s, maybe early 30s, peak reproductive years.
And they go through a lot of screening, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. Rigorous screening, medical history, infectious diseases, comprehensive genetic testing, psychological evaluations, the works.
So you're starting with the highest quality biological material possible, essentially.
That's the goal. By using eggs from a young, thoroughly screened donor, you dramatically reduce the risk of those age-related chromosomal errors we talked about.
Which must have a big impact downstream, like in the embryology lab.
Huge impact. Because the eggs are healthier genetically, more of them fertilize successfully and develop well, we see a much higher percentage progressing to the blastocyst stage.
Remind us, blastocyst is day 5 or 6 of development.
That's right, day 5, day 6. It's a critical point where the embryo has hundreds of cells, it's differentiated, and it's shown it has the developmental competence to keep going.
So getting to blastocyst is like passing a major test.
Exactly. And with donor eggs, maybe 60 to 80% of fertilized eggs might reach that stage compared to much lower rates, sometimes seen with older eggs. That directly translates to better implantation chances.
Okay. Now, what about fresh versus frozen donor eggs? Is one better? Does freezing hurt that quality?
That's a great question, and the answer has really changed over the last decade or so. It used to be that fresh was considered superior.
But not anymore.
Not really, no. Thanks to vitrification, this ultra-rapid freezing technique, the survival rates for frozen eggs are incredibly high now. Success rates with frozen donor eggs are pretty much on par with fresh cycles.
Wow. So the technology caught up.
It really did. And frozen eggs offer huge advantages logistically. Egg banks have inventory ready to go. You don't have to synchronize the donor cycle with the recipient's cycle, which can be complicated and stressful.
So more flexibility, same great results. That seems like a win-win.
Generally, yes. It makes the process much smoother for the intended parents.
Okay, so we've got these amazing eggs, but here's where it gets really interesting for me, the recipient's role. Even though the genetics come from the donor, the intended mother's body is growing the baby. Her uterus is vital, right?
Absolutely fundamental. You can have the best embryo in the world, but if the uterine environment isn't ready, implantation won't happen. So preparing the recipient is just as critical.
How does that work? What's involved?
It starts with a thorough evaluation of her uterus. Usually an ultrasound, maybe a saline sonogram or hysteroscopy, to check for anything that could interfere like polyps, fibroids, scar tissue. You want the clear, healthy space.
Okay, clearing the runway, basically.
Exactly. And then it's about building the perfect lining. This involves hormone therapy.
Estrogen and progesterone.
First, estrogen is used to thicken the endometrial lining. We monitor that growth with ultrasounds, aiming for a good thickness, usually somewhere between, say, 7 and 14 millimeters.
Is there an ideal thickness?
Yeah, the sort of sweet spot is often considered maybe 8 to 12 millimeters, but anything over 7 is generally okay.
And then the progesterone comes in.
Yes. Once the lining is thick enough, progesterone is added. That's the hormone that makes the lining receptive, sort of changes its structure on a molecular level so the embryo can attach. Timing is everything here.
So her body is getting perfectly synchronized for when the embryo arrives.
That's the entire goal. Her uterus provides the implantation site, the nourishment, the protection. It's the incubator for the next 9 months. Its role is massive.
Okay, uterus prepped. Let's jump back to the lab for a sec. The donor eggs are fertilized, usually with the partner's sperm or donor sperm. What if there are issues on the sperm side?
Good point. If there are concerns about sperm quality, maybe low count, poor motility, or even issues related to advanced paternal age, the lab will often use ICSI.
Intracytoplasmic sperm injection.
Right, where they select a single, healthy-looking sperm and inject it directly into the egg. This overcomes many fertilization barriers and maximizes the potential of each precious donor egg.
Makes sense to give those high-quality eggs the best chance. Are there other lab techniques sometimes used to help with implantation itself?
Sometimes, yeah. Depending on the clinic and the patient's history, one common one is assisted hatching, or AH.
What's that?
The embryo develops inside a protective shell, the zona pellucida. To implant, it needs to hatch out of this shell. Assisted hatching involves creating a small opening in that shell, either with a laser or chemically, just before transfer, to potentially help that process along.
Like giving it a little escape hatch.
Kind of, yeah. Another thing you might hear about is embryo glue.
Embryo glue. Sounds
Yeah.
sticky.
It does. It's basically a special culture medium that the embryo is placed in just before transfer. It contains high concentrations of a substance called hyaluronan.
Okay.
Hyaluronan is naturally found in the uterine fluid during the time of implantation. The idea is that this medium might help the embryo adhere better to the uterine lining. The evidence is still debated on how much it helps, but some clinics use it.
Fascinating. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. We've covered the science, the process, but this is obviously deeply personal. Let's talk about the human elements. Choosing a donor, identity. How much say do intended parents actually have in selecting a donor?
They have quite a bit of input on non-identifying characteristics. Egg banks provide detailed donor profiles.
What kind of details?
Things like physical traits, hair color, eye color, height, ethnicity. Also education level, occupation, sometimes even hobbies, talents, or a personal essay. Parents can look for donors who might share some family resemblance or
It's
background.
not like ordering specific traits, right?
No, absolutely not. And ethical guidelines are very strict about that. The focus is always on health, genetic screening, and psychological stability of the donor. It's about finding a healthy match, not designing a baby.
And what about known versus anonymous donation? Using a friend or sister versus a bank donor?
Known donation is definitely an option, using someone you know, like a friend or relative. but it requires very careful consideration
Why is that?
because it involves complex relationships. Extensive psychological counseling for both the donor and the recipients is crucial. Legal agreements are essential to define roles and responsibilities up front. It adds layers of complexity.
And anonymity. Is that even really a thing anymore with DNA testing so widespread?
That's a really important point. True anonymity is becoming, well, almost impossible. Even if contracts specify anonymity, commercial DNA tests mean that donor-conceived individuals might be able to identify their donor or genetic relatives later in life.
So families need to be prepared for that possibility.
Absolutely. Openness and honesty from an early age are generally recommended now.
Which leads to maybe the biggest question for parents considering this. How does it feel? For the child, for the parents? Does the lack of a full genetic link cause issues with bonding or identity?
This is something that's been studied quite a bit, actually, and the research is overwhelmingly positive and, frankly, reassuring.
Oh, good.
Yeah. What consistently matters most is the quality of the parenting. The love, the security, the emotional connection provided by the parents who raise the child, that's the dominant factor in the child's well-being and adjustment.
So nurture really shines through.
It really does. And when parents are open about the child's origins in an age-appropriate way, starting young, donor-conceived children generally thrive and have strong bonds with their families. There isn't this widespread sense of resentment or loss that some people fear.
That's really good to hear. And you touched on something earlier, epigenetics. That even though the DNA comes from the donor, the mother carrying the pregnancy has a biological influence.
Yes. This is such a fascinating area, epigenetics. It's about how genes get switched on or off. Think of DNA as the hardware, the blueprint. Epigenetics is like the software, telling the genes what to do and when.
Okay.
The environment the embryo develops in the mother's uterus plays a role in that software. Her body signals, her hormones, maybe even aspects of her diet and stress levels can influence which of the embryo's genes are expressed.
So the carrying mother is actively shaping how the baby develops biologically.
In a very real way, yes. It's not changing the underlying DNA code, but it's influencing how that code is used. It means the connection between the mother and the child she carries is incredibly profound, far beyond just providing a space to grow.
Wow. That adds a whole other layer.
Yeah.
It really emphasizes the mother's contribution.
It absolutely does. It underscores that the journey is a partnership between the donor's genetics and the recipient mother's biology and nurture.
So bringing this all together, what's the main takeaway? Donor egg IVF isn't just a fallback. It's a powerful, science-backed strategy.
Exactly. It's a precise medical approach that directly addresses limitations related to egg quality or quantity, often due to age. It leverages high-quality eggs from young donors within the incredibly important environment provided by the intended mother.
Leading to high success rates and ultimately the goal of building a healthy family.
That's the objective, yes. It allows people to experience pregnancy and parenthood when other paths might be much less likely to succeed.
Okay, before we wrap up, we need to share our standard disclaimer.
Right.
So just for everyone listening, the discussion we've had today is exclusively educational. We're providing insight into the process and considerations of IVF with donor eggs based on our sources.
But this conversation is definitely not a substitute for professional medical guidance. Please consult with a licensed healthcare provider for personalized medical advice about your specific situation.
Absolutely essential.
And if you're looking for more detailed information about the complete IVF process generally, you can explore the resources available at the portal ivfforme.com.
That's ivfforme.com. And finally, we always like to leave you with a thought to chew on.
Considering everything we've talked about, especially epigenetics.
Yeah. The most profound success factor here maybe isn't just the starting genetic material, but that incredible combination of the prepared, receptive environment of the mother's body and the deep emotional connection. Her biology actively shapes the child's development. So the question for you is, what part of your journey, emotional or physical, are you focusing on preparing next?